It's my honor today to introduce today's speaker, Jill Tyler. Many of you know. As she walked into the room, everybody, hi Jill. So many of you already know Jill. I won't regale you with a long background. Her family, Steve and the kids, have been in Vermillion for 25 years, 16 of which I was fortunate enough to know her. She was one of the first people I actually met, I think, when I moved to Vermillion. She is an Iowa native and a graduate of the University of Iowa. Please don't hold that against her, fellow Huskers. I don't. I'll give her a pass on that. She seems nice anyway, despite that. Some of you know her from her position at the university. She's the associate professor and chair of the Communication Studies Department, formerly the Speech Communication Department, changed a few years ago to Communication Studies. Today she's going to be speaking to us about in her role with AARP-South Dakota, and she's going to be talking about that. She has just started her 6th and final year as the state president, right? Volunteer position as state president. She serves as a volunteer with the organization as well as a spokesperson for the organization. During that time, she has had roles in advocacy at both the state and national level, advocating for the organization, educational programs in caregiving, fraud, and social connections, maintaining social connections, and service programs, including community challenge grants and others. So I am excited to find out more about AARP South Dakota, and I hope you are too, and I invite Jill Tyler to step forward.
Present myself as talking about AARP, I don't always get a lot of an audience that is really excited to hear about it. So I want to especially thank you, first of all, for inviting me, and thank you too for showing up. It just is so nice to have you here. I say that partly, I'm sure, because like all of us, as we emerge from a global pandemic, it just is so nice to see real life, three-dimensional people who are smiling and maskless and courageously and safely stepping out to be with one another. But also because as I have had the chance over the last couple of years to reflect on time and the nature of time, I recognize that it is both our most precious and our most, our greatest resource. And we all have the same amount of it. And so when people really take the time to say, hey, I'm going to step over to campus this afternoon and be with one another, I find that I am appreciating that more and more and more. So I'd like to begin then today by asking you to reflect a bit on the nature of time. Just personally, I'll ask a few questions, and then I would like to just have you kind of think over what your answer to those questions would be. One is probably familiar to you. You've been asked this before. What age would you be if you didn't know what age you are? Well, yeah, I think more on the feel side, Dan. So how old would if you just met yourself and you didn't know how old you were? Yeah. How about this one? Identify for yourself someone from another generation who has had a profound influence on your life. We identify a lot with those folks our own age. We kind of tend to, in fact, as I have gotten older, I have come to assume that pretty much everyone is kind of close to my age. But when we think about people who have really had a profound impact, when I was asked that question, I was surprised to identify folks, not surprisingly, who are older than I am, but wow, a lot of folks who are younger than I am. How about this one? What is something you're better at now, the older you have become, that you have become better at?
Sleeping.
Well, that's good news. Some people lose that knack as they age. And then here's the last one that I think is maybe we find particularly meaningful. What beliefs about your age have stopped you from pursuing something that you wanted to do? I'm too young to do that. I'm too old to do that. I'd do that, but. Okay, so hold on to those ideas. We'll revisit them in a little bit. I want to introduce you to, first of all, my role as the role of state president in AARP. Every state plus Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia have state offices of AARP. So while the national office is located in Washington, D.C., there are state offices, and in some cases, in some of the larger states, population-wise, there are several state offices in every state. And every state has a volunteer state president. We're often encouraged to make sure that we include volunteer, so that you know that I am not being paid to be up here, but it's my privilege. 5 years ago, I was asked if I would be willing to serve as the state president, and here's the deal. State president, sure, right? That seems like that's the top. Like, who would not be willing to do that? The role of state president, as I said, is a volunteer position. I oversee an executive committee of 5 or 6 other volunteers who work to provide leadership for the state office. And I act as kind of a special partner with the executive director of the state of South Dakota, a guy who right now is Eric Gaikowski, who's from Webster. And I work to do things like this, to present what's going on in AARP-South Dakota to groups like you. I also work on to further initiatives and projects of the state. And I also am in charge of coming to groups like this and hearing more about your concerns and your ideas in some of the key areas where AARP has been especially active. So I carry your concerns, I carry the public's ideas and challenges back to the state office as a way to provide feedback and to provide additional challenge to the state programs. So as I have come over the last 5 years to understand AARP better, this is one of my favorite quotations. Again, going back to our ideas of time. It has been widely said that whatever many may say about the future, it is ours. Not only that it may happen to us, but it is in part made by us. That is a quotation from Ethel Percy Andrus. And you don't have to hang around AARP folks very long before you have been introduced to Ethel Percy Andrus. Ethel Percy Andrus was the first female principal in the state of California, high school principal in the state of California. She served for 28 years at Abraham Lincoln High School as their principal. And after retiring in 1944, this is one of our favorite stories of the founding of AARP, she was visiting a colleague and was dismayed to discover when she knocked on the door, found the address of a former colleague. This is a high school chemistry teacher who had recently retired in the state of California, that this colleague was living in a chicken coop. Any of you ever seen a chicken coop? Did you have one on your, yep. Windowless, dark, not heated, not air conditioned. As Ethel Percy Andrus, Dr. Andrus tells the story, she said she knocked on the door and that when the person realized who it was, she came out and stood next to Dr. Andrus there rather than inviting her in. And as they continued to talk, Dr. Andrus discovered that due to a series of financial setbacks, and this is in 1944, and several really unfortunate circumstances, this woman was without health insurance, was without any kind of pension, and was living at the generosity of one of her former neighbors in this chicken coop. This was such a dismay to Dr. Andrus that she began working immediately. She started by addressing state legislatures and addressing state legislatures, asking them to put together a better pension program. She formed what we still recognize at the time was the National Retired Teachers Association. That was created in 1947. Then she began interviewing insurance companies and saying, hey, we need to have insurance. We need to have ways of guaranteeing access and affordability to health care for retired teachers. She visited 42 insurance companies and was turned down by 42 insurance companies before she was finally successful. Then, after she felt that she had addressed at least a couple of issues that were being faced by her friends and former colleagues, she stepped up and said, you know what? This country needs to do a better job of responding to the health needs, to the financial needs, and to the personal and social needs of those who have served their communities so well. And in 1958, AARP was created. All right, I want to go back there because remember, here's what she said. When she created AARP, she said, this is our chance to create our future, and we are going to do it by ensuring health, security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. Okay, now, the story so far rests with those who are, I think I've got a picture of Ethel for you, good. The story so far is focusing pretty clearly on those who are older, on those who are in their retired years. But listen again, health, security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. I don't know that I don't know that I can identify an age where those three issues are not of primary importance. Those were identified by Dr. Andrus in 1958, and they remain the key areas of focus for the social mission, the social organization that AARP has become today. Health security. So right now, of course, now on the right-hand side, what you see is examples of some of the ways that AARP volunteers and staff are working to guarantee, to help people, empower people to choose to live as they want to, and enhance the quality of their lives as they age. So the tasks that have been associated with each of those areas of focus have certainly changed over the years, but these are a few. Health security, focusing on caregiving that is either secured by those from outside the family or family caregiving. It was my experience in working with caregivers who were caring for my mother and in providing support to my sister as she was caring for my mother that actually got me interested in AARP resources to begin with. And like many members and many volunteers for AARP, my first interaction with AARP was I was looking for something. I needed something there. And I needed caregiving resources, and they met that need. That need continues. It's one of the main things, it's one of the most frequent requests that I get for, oh, you're with AARP? Do you have any information on how I can care for my aging relatives or how I can care for a disabled son or daughter at home? So caregiving, brain health, the kinds of making sure that people receive early screening and early intervention in brain and cognitive health, encouraging healthier lifestyles. If you've spent any time at all on the AARP website, I hope you have been encouraged to take up a hobby, and often that hobby has something to do with exercise. Independence and dignity, ensuring that people have the health information and the health resources that they need in order to live vital lives. Financial resilience, financial stability. Retirement savings plans. This has been a real important focus for our South Dakota. We have worked in areas like improving access to retirement savings plans, supporting legislation that will eliminate predatory lending practices, protecting Social Security, preventing fraud through the Fraud Watch Network, and providing tax aid. Tax aid is a completely volunteer-run arm of AARP that provides help to low and moderate income folks in filing their taxes. And finally, in terms of personal and social fulfillment, AARP is very active in terms of community service. They're doing all kinds of learning, helping people kind of to figure out where they can go, how to connect across time and space when they themselves cannot travel, issues of community service, really just the work of figuring out what's next in their lives. So as I was saying, particularly in terms of these three areas of focus, it has become much more natural. This is not a set AARP, what do I want to say, quotation, or it's not part of our vision statement, but what you hear more and more is, you know what, if it's good for somebody who's 70, it's good for somebody who's 7. And that is an important takeaway. That's one of the ideas that I want you to take away from my talk today, is the fact that when we work on behalf of those who are over the age of 50 or over the age of 60 or in retirement, we are also working on behalf of their families. We are also providing the kinds of resources, the kinds of information, and the kinds of the kind of society that we want all of our families to participate in. So, areas of focus, how do we do that? Again, 3 ways. We engage in advocacy at both the state and national levels. We engage in information and education, and we engage in member engagement, member communications, community service, doing things, again, for all kinds of worthy organizations in our communities. I think I can show you a few photos here. Oh, yeah. So one of the things that's been my privilege to do in the last 5 years is to advocate on behalf of South Dakota and on behalf of the concerns of South Dakotans in Washington, D.C. The photo with all of the folks in it, I hope you can see, that is Lobby Day. That's when AARP volunteers from across the country gather in Washington, D.C. Over on the right, you'll recognize Senator Thune, and you may recognize me over there on the left. I think I'm talking, which is kind of remarkable when you consider the other people who are in the photo. But that was at a special meeting of, you may know that Senator Thune, our own South Dakotan Senator Thune, chaired the, Transportation, Commerce, and Science Committee for the Senate. And this was following a hearing on autonomous vehicles. Okay, so that's one of the areas that AARP has become very excited about, not because we are so excited about just riding around in cars that drive themselves, but because we recognize, as Senator Thune does, Senator Thune is a real advocate for this, that if someone is caught at home, it would be great if there were an autonomous vehicle that could travel through rain and snow and sleet and hail to deliver things like mail and medications. Not necessarily other living things, although that certainly is on the horizon, but wouldn't it be great if we could, if a pharmacy in Sioux Falls could load a vehicle and send it out autonomously, completely safely, out to these other, out to people who are in isolated areas. And one of the things that Senator Thune says is that a lot of folks who are working on vehicles, autonomous vehicles that drive themselves, are testing them in urban areas. And he said that's really not so great because you have a lot more people in urban areas. You have people who, will step out in front of vehicles in urban areas, and that's much less likely to happen in South Dakota. So he was really advocating the topography, the geography of South Dakota as a great place for those innovators who are working on autonomous vehicles. I also get to do, I think I might have a photograph here of one of our honorable members. I think, Mr. Rush, you might be in there somewhere. This is Lobby Day in Pier. Again, every January we get to go to Pier, except of course for last January when we weren't able to go, but they were able, and again, this is just a perk of the job of being president of South Dakota AARP, they were able to come up with life-size cutouts of us. So this is not, these are not real people. I don't, yeah, there's nobody, yeah, no real people in there. Yeah, I don't think there's any real people there either, but the second from the left, human, not dog, is me. Yeah, I have a great picture of Art standing next to me. So we've done a lot of work in advocacy in South Dakota, and education and information. I guess I want to, excuse me, I want to follow up on what I was saying about advocacy. AARP is a nonpartisan organization, so it does not affiliate particularly with a candidate or with a political party, of course, but it does affiliate pretty strongly with family concerns. So I always like to say that our affiliations have to do with you and me and with our families. Again, if it's good for someone who's 70, it's good for someone who's 7. The concerns, the kinds of concerns that AARP staff and volunteers work for are the concerns that we as volunteers carry back to our state offices from people just like you. The second area of focus, or the second kind of strategy for accomplishing goals in AARP is broadly understood as education and information. It's one of the reasons I love AARP. I haven't even gotten to that slide yet, reasons I love AARP. But it's one of the reasons I love it is that because of their emphasis on careful research and on information. So it is not just a matter of saying, here, we gave you this solution, or here, we are supporting this legislation. AARP is extremely careful. Of the 2,000 staff members they have at the national level, almost a third are focused on research, are focused on finding and sharing reliable, strong, credible information that is as specific and as useful as possible to AARP members and their families. So the Fraud Watch Network, boy, again, talk about my phone ringing. COVID was a terrible time in South Dakota for fraud. And I know this because of the phone calls that I received from a few victims, more family members, and even folks who are banks, people who run banks in rural areas, who contacted AARP to say, wow, when someone is isolated at home, as many of our seniors were, they are more likely to answer the phone, they're more likely to stay on the phone, and the longer that you stay on the phone, or the more quickly that you respond to an email from a scam artist, kind of don't like that phrase, but someone who is trying to illegally take your money, those are, that is just more likely to happen when people are socially isolated and are not having regular visits from their family. So the AARP Fraud Watch Network is at once an education program, but also you can sign up to be a part of South Dakota Fraud Watch, and you will get notifications via email every time a new fraud has shown its face in South Dakota. And that, of course, is in affiliation with the Attorney General's office. AARP driver safety. Again, one of the concerns that was almost immediately brought back to AARP had to do with how is it that people can continue to live as they desire, to continue to age at home as they desire, and still drive safely. Driver safety programs are very active. I talked a little bit about tax aid. HomeFit is a new and growing area of focus for AARP's education efforts, and that is they work with builders, they work with contractors, they work with families. Here are ways to make your home more livable. And they will do an inventory of your home and look for things like, wow, that's a loose rug. Wow, you know, you should get rid of those steps. You should move that room, you should move that bedroom downstairs. We don't know how to move bedrooms from one floor to another, but we do know how to encourage people, if they are having trouble with stairs, then try not to use them. And so those kinds of inventories that people are doing of homes, and working with really robust relationships with contractors, builders, designers of homes in South Dakota. And finally, community service. AARP, both their volunteers are, of course, already active in community service, but they also, their employees of AARP also are active. They take, I think it's every 2 months, every 60 days, they take a day off as an office and go out to work in the community. They do things like shredding events. If you have papers at home that have sensitive material and you'd like to have them shredded, they do those kinds of things. And they jump in with, you'll recognize, in one case they're serving at the banquet up in Sioux Falls, and folks doing all kinds of work around the state. Not only because this community engagement is important for our communities, but also because being an active and vital part of your community is a really great dimension of your life as you become older. So I want to share a couple of these are more personal. So the information I want to share, why is it that I like AARP so very much? I will tell you. One is, in the 5 years that I have been involved, I continue to be impressed with their organizational structure and their organizational practices. As I mentioned, their national office is located in Washington, D.C., and they have state offices in every state, plus the District of Columbia and a couple of other territories. And it is that organizational structure, they are constantly moving, they are constantly improving, constantly changing, to the point where I'm sure that it is in some ways quite tiring for AARP employees, but is so responsive to the communities in which AARP functions. What you may have noticed, what you may be wondering about, AARP was able to pull off a very successful rebranding effort. So when Ethel Percy Andrus, when she came up with this organization, when she began to create this organization, AARP stood for something that had to do with retired persons. But in 1999, that idea was abandoned in pursuit of real possibilities, RP, real possibilities. My shirt. And the kinds of possibilities that we can, when we work together, make available for all members of our community, no matter their age. They just recently began to realize that there were sometimes just plain old communication issues, but sometimes more serious kinds of disconnects between what's going on at the national office in Washington, D.C., and what's going on in state offices, and as well as differences between a state office in South Dakota and a state office in Hawaii or a state office in Florida. Right? So that they began a comprehensive program to realign their priorities and their practices according to moving from national to nationwide. Still a national organization, still based in Washington, D.C. Lots of great work gets done there, but more and more decision-making power, more and more advocacy work, more and more education work and community service work is being initiated at the state level and even at local community levels. So I talked about that rebranding, national to nationwide. I talked a little bit earlier about why I love the focus on research and information. AARP is very careful not to give out any kinds of false or misleading information. There are some great institutions that still do that. AARP is one of them. Another great initiative for AARP is Livable Communities, the idea that our communities should be more livable. And that has been an initiative that looks at things like walkability and accessibility. It looks at things like entertainment, transportation, job opportunities, entertainment, the arts, education, and all of the things that every community needs to really thrive. Again, every community, whether these are real possibilities for people of every age and for families. So the Livable Communities Initiative, you'll be hearing more and more about that. In South Dakota, it is a broad coalition of several organizations, from education organizations to public service organizations to healthcare organizations that are working together under the name Livable 605. I encourage you to look that up, especially if you're looking for some volunteer opportunities. And finally, I want to emphasize community challenge grants. We are so proud of community challenge grants. This is a program that was initiated a few years ago when the national office discovered that they had money that could be put to direct use in communities. So they solicited grant applications from communities across the country, and as you might imagine, received hundreds of grant applications. South Dakota has been very successful in securing these grants. Right here in Vermillion, 3 years ago, a state-of-the-art horseshoe pitch was installed. Okay, good. Was installed over in Prentice Park. And just as recently as last week, the newest set of opportunity, the newest set of community challenge grants for the state of South Dakota. These are things like increasing accessibility to a park. They are things like cleaning up, repainting public places. Mission, South Dakota, Sisseton, South Dakota, lots in Pierre, a couple in Yankton, several in Rapid City, adult playgrounds. That is the kinds of get fit kinds of places that allow you to get a pretty good workout just by walking your way through the adult fit playground. I wish that I had written down more of the really amazing grants that have come from the National Office of AARP to communities right here in South Dakota. Okay, I appreciate your kindness and your attention, and I would love to entertain any questions that you have. Yes, Stephen.
What happened to the lady who lived in the chicken coop?
So Dr. Andrus never identified her by name, but Dr. Andrus did, because of her own, invest a lot of her own money, as well as some other, find some other investors to create a senior living center near Los Angeles called, appropriately enough, Gray Gardens. And the way the story goes is that the woman in the chicken coop was able to move into that facility. Thanks for asking. It is in Sioux Falls. I tend to locate everything by restaurants. It's just off of Louise, South Louise, behind Panera Bread, just off of South Louise. I have just, as of last month, started my last year. So we have 2-year terms, and we term out after 3 terms. So next June, they will. Maybe, yeah, if they let me. Yeah. Sometimes I get to throw out the game ball for football. I rehearse that for quite a while before I actually take the field. Ooh, that's a good question. There are 38 million nationwide. Oh, I should have had you guess that. Wow, shoot. There are 38 million nationwide. And how many AARP members are in this room? Whoa, Way to go. Okay, now I have to do this. This is a little bit of my own assessment data. How many of you learned something in what I told you today? How many members learned something in what I told you today that you didn't know before? Not bad. Okay, good. Good. They monitor me. They check to make sure that I'm...
How many of us joined to get the discounts?
The benefits.
On that, there was a viral TikTok going around on AR, like travel hacks that multiple people sent me. It had like 500,000 views of this guy that does like these sorts of things. He's a millennial. It was like join AARP and all the discounts. So I did join that. I always thought, oh.
You thought it was yes, and you thought it was a special privilege that really wasn't open to you, didn't you? You thought that was something you couldn't take advantage of. You
I'm
can't.
assuming, so maybe just check maybe it's up to 39 million. Doctors paying $16 to get discounts.
On that note, it is phenomenally reasonable. $16 for multiple people. I think the first time I used it was a couple of months after I got it, and that discount bought me 3 or 4 years worth of membership.
At $16 a year membership, right?
I was curious, how do they make their money to run all these programs? Certainly $16 a year is not paying for this.
Right, right. But there's 38 million, so I mean that's a math problem. You could. When I talked a little bit about, I'm going to answer this question, but I'm also going to preface it with I'm not exactly sure. But when I talked about the structure of AARP, when I talk about advocacy and education and community work, I am talking about the parent AARP organization. But there are several other supplemental organizations. There's the AARP Foundation. There is an AARP group that gives direct grants to folks who are in trouble, that gives direct grants following some sort of natural disaster or some other sort of issue. There are lots of structures, very well run, and they have different kinds of identification categories in terms of what they can and can't do with money. Any other questions?
Is there an age limit? I always thought you had to be 55.
No, we've really opened that up. They still talk about, we talk a lot about the 50 plus, but I think that they will take anybody over the age of 35. So just a couple more years, Dan, and you'll be able to.
I'm 32 and they accepted me no problem.
Whoa, there you go.
Unless there's a different class of membership, they took my $16.
Nope, you've got it all. That's full benefit. Sometimes people ask how they could get more involved in AARP. And so I do want to, I guess I already had that, didn't I? I do want to make sure that you see these websites and that you know that the state office is right up there in Sioux Falls, and if you would like to touch base with them at any time, they will be delighted to welcome you into the ranks of membership or into the ranks of volunteership. I'll be around for a while. If any of you have questions or problems you would like me to pass along, I would be delighted. Thank you so much.